Steve Treseler is a Seattle-based saxophonist, composer, teaching artist, and author who performs and leads creative music workshops across the US. He and trumpeter Ingrid Jensen are co-leaders of the album Invisible Sounds on World Rhythm Recordings, a project that was featured in the New York Times, Downbeat, and on NPR's Jazz Night in America. Steve is the founder of Infinite Improvisation, offering creative music experience in a variety of mediums, in person and virtual workshops, instructional books, and digital courses. Steve is the author of 2 instructional books on improvisation, which are used in classrooms around the world. He's on the faculty at Seattle Jazz Ed and the Pacific Music Institute in Honolulu. He's presented clinics at Berklee College of Music, New England Conservatory, Jazz Education Network, National Conference, WMEA, and California Jazz Conservatory. Steve's also a great friend of mine. He's he's a rare breed of someone that's like a superstar player that can play with anybody on any stage, but is also a spectacular teacher and conveyor of ideas and agile thinker, which is something I really respect. And I'm really proud to be his friend. And I'm really stoked that he's here today. So let's give a warm Zoom welcome to Steve Treseler. Yeah, hello, hey Steve.
Hey, thanks for all that, Eric. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks to Marianne and everyone for getting me connected with you all. So I grew up in Edmonds and went to New England Conservatory and then came back, and I've been here as an independent musician and business person since 2003, I think. So without a full-time day job, just doing the freelance hustle, a lot of lessons and gigs and recording, and starting to design my own program. So I have, as a teaching artist, sort of dual careers as the performing recording artist, Eric was talking about, and the education side, which I still have a private studio, but very much love teaching creative music. So improvisation, beginning composition, helping people create their own music. And there's many folks who are very highly skilled at their instruments, but don't know the first place to start when it comes to creating something new. And I'd like to share some of these ideas and some prompts, and this will be hands-on. All of us will be participating in some way, and I would love to have a couple volunteers to play some games here in a little bit. So let's actually start we're gonna do this exercise. If you have headphones on, maybe take off one of them so you can still hear me, but also hear outside. But we're going to do sort of a listening exercise here. So what I want you to do is just listen to all the sounds you hear in your environment around you. So things near and distance, you might hear appliances, traffic, conversation, birds, something. So just take a moment and close your eyes and just listen to the ambient sounds around you. Okay, so next, this maybe works best if we're all muted, which I think we are. But so now what I want you to do is contribute one sound of your own to this tapestry of sound. So it could be, you could tap, hiss, shuffle, sing, some kind of sound that's fitting right into these tapestry of ambient sounds around you. So okay, well, we've executed our first improvisation here. So, I mean, improvising a duet with the sounds around you, it's something that can be performed anywhere and at any time, and it taps into some really important creative practices that we'll explore throughout the next hour. That improvising isn't just random noodling, but it's really attunement to the sounds and the people in this room at this moment, not just anything. And this type of listening like this, that we're not creating sound on silence, that there's all these other things contributing to what's in our environment. So practicing improvisation goes beyond learning a new skill. I mean, this journey helps you and your students develop your musical voice and make meaningful connections with others. And these ideas that you generate, they can stand alone as improvisations, but they can also plant the seeds for composition or songwriting or even digital music production. There's a spectrum between this is composed, this is improvised, and we're living somewhere in between. And but creating original music, it's not just a magical gift that some people have and others don't. I mean, it can be accessed by anyone. It's really as natural as a conversation. We don't plan out word for word what we're going to say when Eric and I are chatting. And Pauline Oliveros, she's the creator of Deep Listening, which we'll discuss a little bit. She says that everybody improvises their way through every day, and so I do that with music. And even when we're young, we the quote about Picasso that Picasso said that everyone starts an artist. My daughter, when she was little, well, she'll still do it on, but she's 3 years old. On demand, I'm like, okay, write a song about the dog or a dinosaur or something, and she just come up with it. It's not like, oh, I don't have any ideas, like some of us that get hung up as we get older. And so, yeah, bringing this into your studios, this will help your students compose and improvise their own music. And I'm sure some of you already do this. Others of you might not know where to start if it wasn't part of your training. But I want to push back on the idea that this isn't relevant or it's just maybe a supplemental fun activity. That some people do feel fully self-expressed interpreting music that's already written down, and that is totally awesome if that's your path. But it's not for everybody. And I'd say it's a disservice to give all creative decisions about what notes students are playing to composers and conductors, and that we're all just resigned to following instructions and with some tasteful interpretation. So I'd like to get into some practices and some hands-on prompts and activities to get the juices flowing. So I'm going to show you a little clip from this is a video from PBS Soundfield. They actually reached out to me to help them write the script for this, which is pretty cool. It's their social media outlet that answer all kinds of interesting musical questions. And this is why don't classical musicians improvise anymore? So I did a bunch of research on this when I was in grad school. So helped contribute to this, which is awesome. And it's in a format that's way cooler than something I would have put together on my own. Share the correct screen. Dang it. Oh, it's this one. Let's see if this... All right.
When you think of musical improvisation, the first thing that comes...
Raise your hand if you can hear that. That's good. Okay. Technology working. So, just watch a couple minutes of this.
When you think of musical improvisation, the first thing that comes to mind might be jazz or the blues. But the practice of improvisation is actually a part of many musical traditions all across the globe. As a classically trained musician, I've personally been working on developing my improvisational skills over the past few years, as you can see from these charts that detail how I spend my practice hours.
Hey, do it again.
Today, classical musicians are known for playing music as written in a score, note for note. But this wasn't always the case. This may surprise you, but from the Middle Ages to about the late 1800s or so, improvisation was actually a big part of music performance and training. So why have classical musicians stopped learning how to improvise?
Drums slamming, gentle piano. I like it. The subtitles.
Classical music improvisation dates back to the Middle Ages. Soloists would add spontaneous embellishments over familiar melodies, and the score provided served as a skeleton of the melody over which musicians would add their own variations. An example of melodic variation today might be found at a sporting event with the national anthem. Singers would typically add in variations and fills while keeping the melody and lyrics still recognizable. Going overboard with embellishments, however, is never ideal because it can easily lead to a distasteful interpretation. Classical musicians also improvise accompaniments to melodies. In fact, the first record of improvisation in Western music comes from 9th century writings that detail how to add counter melodies to Gregorian chants. Later, during the Baroque era, this type of improvised accompaniment became what is called basso continuo. They used a kind of music notation called figured bass, which provides a bass line along with symbols that indicate what intervals to use, chord suggestions, and types of voicings. So a musician, say a keyboardist, would take this information and would
So I'll send you the link to this, and you can watch it. I'll send some follow-up material so you can check out the rest. And she improvises some cadenzas on the fly based on themes that the drummer gives her, and it's pretty entertaining. So really interesting to know some research I did, kind of understanding why it fell out of practice. A whole host of reasons. Yeah. So when I hear it's like, well, I don't improvise. I play classical. Well, actually, you're not quite off the hook. Oh, thanks, Eric. I'm peeking. Okay, there we go. So, but for a lot of folks, it can be overwhelming, the idea of like, oh, improvising a cadenza or improvising a bebop solo. It's sort of, the process itself can be overwhelming. So I try to present some ways of getting into the creative part with the tools you already have without having to learn some massive amounts of technique. You all already have massive amounts of technique, and even with wherever you're at, we can make the creative thing happen. So it's not just about historic performance practice. It's about finding your own voice, creating your own music. And I want to go over a few creative practices, because the way that we can practice improvisation, but it might be different than the practicing you're used to, where you have a very specific goal and you're chopping away at it to like learn a piece of music or learn something technical, which we all do to learn skills. This is a much messier process and more about the process rather than the product. And when we get to point, we might not even know where point B is when we start, and we end up with something that's surprising. So different type of practice. And I have these through my new program that have launched and I'm still continuing to work on, Infinite Improvisation. Have this 5 creative practices: experimentation, play, limitations, deep listening, and reflection. I'm going to touch on these, and then we'll start playing. So the experimentation part, that improvisation is very much like the scientific method, that we are following our curiosity and we're setting up musical experiments. We might have a hypothesis about it, and then we see what happens. But what's really important is that we're gathering data and we're not taking it personally. That if it doesn't come out quite the way that we expected, someone's like, oh, I suck at this, I should just give up, this is embarrassing. Rather than taking it and learning for it, maybe changing the parameters, get a new hypothesis, and not taking it personally, right? Just like a scientist, if they have some piece of data that's not in line with their hypothesis, doesn't mean they're a bad scientist. It means they're learning, and yeah. So it's a messy process, and it takes that process of experimentation and trying things and just seeing what happens. And so this element of play, that we do say that we play music. I'm going to play music, but sometimes we're very disconnected from the element of play. If we're grinding through technical exercises, or we've got a high stakes performance or audition, or a demanding teacher breathing down our neck, but really connecting with this element of play, which doesn't mean that it's trivial. I mean, it's really brings about all kinds of creativity. It makes the process enjoyable. And one of my favorite books on the subject, Stephen Nachmanovich's Free Play, I'm going to quote him. He discusses an old Sanskrit word, lila, or lila, which means play, but it's richer than our word, and it means divine play, the play of creation, destruction, and recreation, the folding and unfolding of the cosmos. Lila, free and deep, is both the delight and enjoyment of this moment, the play of God, and it also means love. So the play, it can be that deep kind of creation play with the materials that we have to work with, but also the more, childlike, we're going to be playing some games, having some fun. Third practice is limitations. And it can be a little counterintuitive, by putting self-imposed limitations or restrictions on the tools we have can really get the creative juices flowing. It could be like a writing prompt. If I just said, hey, Eric, you need to write me an article for tomorrow, he'd be like, where do I start? But I could say something really specific. Tell me about an early memory of your first music teacher, or a concert you went to, or write a haiku about the guitar in life. And suddenly you have a framework, and I'd imagine that you'd have a starting point. So actors do this through some theater games. Heck, you can watch, Iron Chef, and they make the chefs come up with make a dessert with the secret ingredient like tuna fish, and suddenly they have this limitation and create with it. So we'll do a lot with limitations. Deep listening. This is a nod to Pauline Oliveros, who founded this program called Deep Listening. And she describes this as deep listening as a form of meditation. Attention is directed to the interplay of sounds and silences. Sound is not limited to musical or speaking sounds, but inclusive of all perceptible vibrations. So we were tapping into some deep listening for that opening activity, listening around us. But the deep listening, it goes beyond just listening to the sounds around us, but also listening to the inner sounds, like what we might hear in our head or something that we have inside that we want to bring to the outside. Also listening deeply to recorded performances, live performances, and our own sounds that we're creating on our instruments and the sounds of the collaborators around us. Sometimes we're very much in thinking mode and making sure we're executing and aren't paying as much attention as we could to the sounds around us in a musical event. And finally, reflection. We take all of this data, these musical experiments that we make. In some ways, we need to just embrace them for what they are and the sounds that come out. But we'll take that data and move in the direction of we want to make music that's relevant and resonates with us. And we ask questions like when we improvise, we set up a musical experiment. What was compelling? Why was it compelling? When was it not effective, and why? And what changes can we make? What patterns emerged? What could we do to make the music better? And did you discover any material you might want to develop further? So we take all this raw information and then start shaping it into something more personal. So I want to touch on this spectrum between. So we're going to put some of these into play and play with the spectrum between improvisation and composition. So I would love to have a piano player volunteer to play a little game, the A game. Let's see, who's ready to do something. Okay, I see Karen McCullough. Thanks for putting yourself out there. Okay, so Karen, yeah, you can go ahead and unmute, and I'll.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna play the A game. So what this is I want you to play. You're gonna play a short piece, and you're only gonna use the pitch. You're only gonna play the pitch A on the piano. So you can play A in any register, any order, pedal, no pedal, articulation, and just playing around and see what you come up with. So this is a very strict limitation. You only have one note, so you have to think about what musical elements you can vary to make something interesting. If it, again, where it's an experimentation. And then if you have your original sound on, if you've got that going, okay, cool. You're all pros, I guess. Get that going. Okay, well, let's hear it. It could be 30 seconds to a minute, or this thing goes to 11. I'm off the hook if you play for 40 minutes. But okay, Karen's A piece. That was awesome. Okay. So when we have a limitation, we think about, it's like, well, what can we do to make this musically interesting? And my opinion is that was quite interesting. So what were some, people can just kind of chime in, what were some musical elements that she wasn't able to vary the pitch beyond one letter name? So what were some elements that Karen was playing with to kind of make it musically interesting?
Rhythms.
Rhythms and pulse, for sure.
And octaves, different ranges.
The register spread. Absolutely.
Texture.
Sorry?
Texture. She started with single notes and then went with octaves.
Yeah.
She's playing around with that.
There we go. And that's what this is about, the limitations. It's not about the limitation. It's about you're free in other areas that maybe if you were free to just play whatever, you asked me to just jam on a saxophone solo since we're not thinking about texture and you're just playing other stuff. That was awesome. Karen, do you know the piece I'm about to play for everyone? Oh, okay. Well, you're a like mind here with Ligeti. This is actually the structure for a series of piano pieces by Ligeti that he was known for setting up musical obstacles, and this is a set of pieces where. Oh, you know what? I forgot part of it. Karen, I'm gonna have you do part two, and then oh man, I can't believe I forgot almost the most important part. You improvise on A, and the way we know that you're done, that you play the note D. Once you play D once, we're done. D for done. You want to do another short one? You can continue to vary what you were doing before. You can try a whole new approach, whatever you want. Anyway, I goofed up the limitation. Got to end with D, otherwise it's
Okay. D for done.
or dog. There we go. D for done. So that's the structure of this piece by Ligeti. Kind of like just listening to it, but all of you would find it. I think would find it interesting to look at the score as it goes. But let's see. So that is the structure for this piece. That did I share the wrong thing? Where is the right window? Give me a second here. Okay, 1 second. I may have goofed something up here. I think I closed the window that had some of the tabs I was sharing. All right. So this is 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And Karen, I've run this exercise, with lots of folks, and yours had so much in common with what I'm about to play. Ah, stop. Okay, I'm going to share. Sorry for the hiccup here. So it's the exact same structure. The note A, and it ends with D. Okay. There we go. So Karen was just on the spot, came up with a bunch of some of the same textures and rhythmic ostinatos patterns. Yeah. So that piece is the Ritchikars. There's a series of them where the next movement has 3 pitches. I think it's E, F, and F sharp. The next movement uses 4 pitches. I think it's like a C split third chord, so C, E flat, E, and G. And each movement adds another pitch, and by the end, it's a 12-tone piece. But even for Karen, you notice I didn't say, do you want to play a solo improvisation piece? I just said, we're going to play a game. So that's one of my tricks for framing. I do this with kids. I have a lot of like musical theater games. We do things like Guess the Animal and Growing and Shrinking and kind of things that have some novelty and goofy things built into it. But there's some serious things happening, but that's that play element that kind of opens us up and it feels like less of a big deal. Okay, I would love another volunteer. This one does not have to be piano to do another game just like that, but a different structure. Okay.
The cellist. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, perfect. Elena, did I say that right?
Yeah, it's Eliana.
Eliana. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, cello.
Cello to make it.
Yeah, let's get a variety of texture. Here, give me one.
Make sure.
Oh, I see what happened. I need to something here. I accidentally closed some windows I needed. Awesome. Getting ready. So any thoughts? I actually wanted to. Oh, I think Leanna, we're getting some echo. Mute for a second. Thanks. So, any thoughts on the Ligety piece? Again, just sort of the same question for when we put Karen on the spot. But what were some elements that made that? Here's the note A for 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and I thought certainly it seemed to keep everyone's attention. So some of the same things we were talking about. Any other musical elements that there was enough variety that it kept it interesting?
Dynamics were really extreme.
Extreme dynamics. Yep, that's one of the prompts we'll get to later. I was inspired by that. So soft you can barely hear it, and yeah. There was that rhythmic groove, but there was also the kind of measured accelerando. I didn't realize that was all notated as a polyrhythm. It just sounds like it's speeding up, but it's cool to see. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, dynamics, obviously, and expression, it's like staccato, etc. Legato, staccato, in that piece.
Yeah, all those articulation. One thing I really like when he's really pounding on it, you could start to hear all these harmonics resonating. So I could really hear like 5th and 7th partials. So then it's like, well, the note A, it splits it apart. You can hear little spectral sounds in there. So you can hear that the note A isn't just A. You can bring out all these other sounds when you're playing with a resonating box like the piano. Okay, so for the next prompt, we're just going to play. We're going to play a C major scale. So let's see. Can you hear my MIDI when I do that? Okay, so I'm just going to play the notes in order. But you can switch registers whenever you want. So do, mi, fa, sol, la. But you're playing the notes in order. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then starting. You can end whenever you like, but you just keep that cycle going. And you can experiment. You can change the note duration, what register you're in, however you like. But this is another pitch limitation, and it's just C major scale. Okay, we're ready for some cello, and I'll mute so stop the echo. And then you can keep going for another cycle too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So go around a couple times, and then I'll let you off the hook. Awesome. Ah, thank you.
That's actually more thinking on the cello than on the piano.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
It's a little
absolutely.
harder.
So what was it? So tell us about what your experience was like doing that, how it felt, or what you came up with, or if anything surprised you, or whatever. Just a little reflection on the process.
There were other things I wanted to do, and then I had to remember the rules. So, but I found sometimes I fell into a rhythm that I wanted to repeat a couple times. But just for the purpose of experimentation, I moved on. Yeah.
And then yeah, you can keep track of those things. And again, there's later on if you're writing a piece, it's the value of that is making yourself stick to the rules. But again, they're temporary rules for now. So if you suddenly got this great idea for a piece, well, by all means use it. Even if you break the rules later on. But yeah, but that's it. That's the spirit. You're experimenting, and then that wasn't quite right. Well, let's try that and make an adjustment. And that's the kind of vibe we want to get into, rather than like I'm taking a quiz and I need to get 10 out of 10 and I have to avoid making a mistake at all costs. Like kind of getting out of that mindset in this more playful. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone know what piece I'm about to play? Oh, fun. Okay. Surprise. So this is a choral piece by Arvo Pärt that's called Solfeggio, and it uses this same limitation. They're just singing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and it's really hauntingly beautiful. So let's check this out. Pause that here. That keeps going for a while. But yeah, I love that. I'm a sucker for some of those diatonic clusters, and yeah, it's a different. It puts a different frame around. Okay, we're gonna play our scales. It's like turning from an exercise. Well, what else? What else can we do with it? So I think you're starting to get the idea of how much you can draw out of, especially with these musical limitations. And I'll share this as well. I'll send Marianne some follow-up stuff. But you can sort of set up some of your own experiments like this. And this is, as I said, my background's largely in jazz. But a lot of these are what we call, more genre neutral, genre fluid, I guess, where we're not teaching a specific music language or groove, that you can sort of take all the skills that you've already developed and work with those. And so I have some menus that I set up to set up some of your own musical experiments, like what we were just doing. Sometimes having a menu of ideas is helpful rather than just like come up with an experiment, just giving you something to start with. And I actually got the ideas when my wife and I were getting married. Our the minister we're working with, she's like, so do you have an idea of what you want in your ceremony? I'm like, not really. We know what we don't want. And she said, well, would you like my Chinese takeout menu of wedding services? And we're like, okay, yes, please. So it had like a whole menu of here's openings, here's little activities or ceremonies, here's closings, here's readings, and then we chose some from that, but then it just gave us a launching point to put together a ceremony that we found that ended up being pretty personal, even though it started from her takeout menu. So that gave me the idea to this creative limitation menu. So choosing 2 different limitations from 2 different categories and playing a short improvisation, 30, 60 seconds, has a clear beginning, middle, and end. Just what Eliana and Karen were doing, similar ideas, but now you can just pick 2. It's like you're at Panera Bread or McDonald's and you just pick 2 for your lunch combination. And then it's not about picking the right ones, but then kind of seeing what you can do. Eric, can I put you on the spot for one? You got your rig?
Heck yeah. Are you?
All right. Should we pick 4? Let's pick 4 Eric. He's a good sport. So,
Yeah.
So Katie, pick one limitation for Eric off this list.
More silence than sound.
Dang it! I knew you were going to say that. That's not how I roll.
Plays guitar.
Man, that is brutal. Okay, I like it. That's going to be really hard. Okay.
Okay, and then Ryan, call out another one, but now we have the density category is off limits. So something from dynamics, pitch, range, articulation, or rhythm.
Pentatonic scale, please.
Oh, okay. Softball after the more yeah.
See, this is why Ryan and I are close friends. So
Yeah.
a pentatonic scale with more silence than sound.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's going to take some, what do we call it? Impulse control, executive function.
Okay.
To keep the more silence than sound.
And you're meaning major pentatonic. It sounds like, right? Okay.
It can go. Yeah. But if you started on 6, it is minor pentatonic. So if you want to,
I got it.
You can get it going the other way too. So all right, take it away.
Okay, cool. Are you still screen sharing?
Yeah, I guess we don't need to look at it anymore, huh? We need to look at Eric. Okay, I think
more silence and sound. Wow.
Pentatonic. Yep.
That was the most difficult thing that's the fewest notes I've ever played in the amount of time in my entire life since I started playing.
So how did it feel doing it other than feeling awkward?
Oh, I feel like the tendency of a guitar player when put on a spot in like a guitar store or in front of friends is to play as many notes as you can as quickly as possible. That's how we were raised as guitar players,
I
right?
play saxophone. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, but it was really fun trying to like figure out how to get into silence, because usually on guitar you're using vibrato and time to let notes decay, right? And so I was like, oh shit, how do I get into a silent moment? Like that was like, how do I create silent? How do I create that rest? Because the tendency of the guitar is to create rests through, it's work, right? Because the notes want to ring, you want to keep it going, but to use silence as a device, as like I'm thinking like as a consonant, right? Like the silence is not just something that happens, but like you're making it that moment. That was interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, and it made us listen too, because you played it. It really makes us consider what you played and go, what's he going to play next? But you're able to hold the tension through the silence. Because sometimes I do this with a variation of this I do with jazz players. They're playing with the rhythm section, and I want people to play as sparsely as possible, but without people thinking that you're lost or you're done. If you rest too long at the end of a chorus of a jazz solo at a jam session, someone else just jumps in and plays over you. So how can you play that it's still a meaningful part, that it doesn't sound like you just quit, that it's intentional, and then not making a sound until you absolutely have to continue the music.
Yeah, I think I was trying to avoid tonal center to try to keep that going, because I felt that.
So you can do that, and sometimes I've noticed that if I do end with one of those decays and let it fade, it can set up a much longer silence than going what's going on. So you kind of prepare that. So that's what I learned from doing that myself. Same thing, solving these little problems that you might not have dealt with before, especially if you're like testing out guitars at Guitar Center. And
I can't wait to practice that. That's a really cool. Yeah. That's cool, man. That's fun.
Yeah, your friend. That was just one thing off the menu, and it did, but it still had your personality. It sounded like Eric ripping on the guitar, and it would sound much different if someone else. Actually, let's have a piano player do this all on black keys. Who wants to jump in and try more silence and sound, pentatonic, and you don't have to sound like a blues guitar hero. You can just sound like you. Can we put a cat?
Here we go. If nobody's jumping in.
There we go. But I like awkward silences, so I'm okay with that. Jeffrey, thank you. So let's do the same thing. So we'll do pentatonic to make it easier. Just all black keys, more silence than sound, but then you can interpret that however you like, and we'll just see. It'll be a contrast to Eric most likely.
I jumped in hoping the sound would work. I've never done the setup like this before, so we'll see.
Okay, well I hear you talking, so we'll.
Oh, we gotta turn the piano on. Do we have sound?
We do.
All right. I'm cheating a little bit.
There we go. That's not cheating. No, that's how you do it. But Eric's idea was he played a phrase and then left lots of silence. You were leaving more space between each note, which is another way to do it. And it gives it much more of a pointillistic kind of texture. Just a different way of getting around the same limitations. And we'll each do it a little bit different. So I've got an expanded menu and then some other menus. So I'll share this ebook. I'm actually in the process of rewriting it, or I guess a new version called the Infinite Improvisation Handbook, kind of rebranding it and changing some things. Right now it's called Creativity Triggers for Musicians. So I'll share that one with all of you. And there's other menus. The mode menu, there's a pentatonic scale menu for doing some pitch limitations. We may play with one of those shortly. Thanks, Jeffrey. So I think now I'm actually going to take some questions. I decided I don't like ending with Q&A. I want to end with something where we do some playing. So kind of open season on this, or using it. I don't know, anything slightly related. You can throw it in the chat, or I don't know how you usually moderate these, but
Question. for you.
Or performer.
Earlier, when you were talking about the element of play, you said you read a quote from somebody. Who was that again?
Oh, Stephen Nachmanovich. He has a book called Free Play. He's a new one called The Art of Is. I really like Free Play. I'll link to his book here in a second. He's one of my favorite thinkers on the. I mean, a lot of even the limitation menus are inspired also by his book. His is more for like improvisation in life and in art, the intersection of music and philosophy and being a car mechanic or chemical engineer, how improvisation plays into that. But he is a performing musician as well. I'll throw the link in the chat. Always, every time I go back to it, always new stuff. Oh, no, not just to Eric, everyone. Cool. Karen, you got a question? And I'll drop that PDF in here too, the menus.
Yes. So would you ever combine this with composition? I have a student and he wants to make up his own music. And rather than have him noodle around, I could certainly give him some limitations. But he's also interested in writing down once he finds an idea. At what point would you say, let's write this down? Would you say, okay, you came up with this, you like it today, let's figure out how to notate it, and you can change your mind tomorrow?
Yeah, there's different ways of doing it. That's a great question. Like, when do you capture something to use later, or when is it just in the moment and that's it? So that can be tough to figure out. So in that area, I find other ways to capture it. Sometimes I like having students just record themselves doing it. Then when they find something, the capture might be the recording and not stressing about the notation. But the piece itself, it could be something like with kids, I like starting with graphic scores too. So they might draw a shape or something to represent a specific limitation. And then it's not going to be it might not be exactly the same every time. Because we could get really hung up in, if you've got a certain kind of texture, trying to write it down exactly how you want it can hang up some people if you just get too bogged down in the in like writing it like with Western notation. So I think graphic scores can be really good. Like here is this. I'm actually putting together a resource for a whole bunch of examples of some graphic scores. They could use symbols or a picture. Here's some limitations, and here's what it looks like as a gesture or like a drawing. And then we go from this event to that event. And so it's still a score, but then you don't get hung up with notation. Or certain pieces they come up with might lend themselves very well to, hey, this one would be easy to write down. But if it's more textural, it can be confusing. So I would use, recording, graphic scores, or other way of capturing it and making it a composition. And compositions can be partly improvised too. So sometimes it might be easier to make a score like that. But if the student is well versed with notation and can write it down, I mean, that happens when I'm working with students on jazz transcription. Sometimes they get caught up in writing it down that they get so much of the value from playing along, but transcribing the rhythms and writing it down, some of them could just do it, and other of it just totally, we would get so hung up on that we're missing the parts that we want to get out of that process, which is listening and copying and getting all the nuance. That transcribing rhythms is important, but I didn't want to get held up with that. I see something in the chat here. Some of these, a lot of interest. Whether or not this is boring as a audience member. Well, part of this is like when you're in your studio, like when we're doing a lot of these experimentations, this is when we're in our studio. If it's like an artist mixing colors, I'm like, well, is this boring for someone at the art gallery? And I'm like, well, it's not for them at the moment. It's part of the process, like putting this together. And if depending on what the results are, at the moment, I mean, the ultimate goal of this is to find that you're not necessarily going to perform experiments. You certainly can, but finding your voice and finding something that you feel like resonates with you and might resonate with other people. So, I mean, it's not, you can just create music in your garage and studio and never share it with anybody, but at what point really does it make it art? It's when it connects with other people. But if you want to do, so these I think of more of like etudes. They're not necessarily things as we're doing it now. We're performing it for each other. This is more of like a workshop. You could perform this. It depends on the right thing. I play in galleries and I play with groups that do some real far out there experimental music, and the audience is expecting that. So that's like a larger a larger question. But this is more what I would say is this is in your studio, in your workspace, the experimentation part. But reflections and then creatudes. I was looking for a term for it. Shoot. I don't know if that's too corny. It's on my dad joke brand though. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for that, Eric. So that's what I'd say. And when it comes to the audience, some people say, well, we need, like, what does the audience think? Well, it depends. If you're at a wedding and they're expecting a cover band, that's an audience. But if I'm in my galleries doing some weird stuff, like you get to choose what your audience is. So if the audience doesn't like what you're playing, you might have to change your music, or oftentimes you might just need to find a new audience. So that's a whole artistic and career kind of thing. Choose the audience, that people that resonate with the kind of music that you play, rather than trying to do something. Anyway, that could go on for a long time. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah, Laura, Cascade Piano Studio. Hi.
Yeah, weird last name.
Yeah.
In terms of incorporating it into lessons, because I'm sort of, don't do a lot of this. Like, do you have like a progression of like, or like, I don't know, in the past when I've given kids like, let's make something up, they just like, they just play a bunch of notes. They don't, yeah. So do you just give them more constraints? Just give more constraints, and like, is there a good progression or
for little kids mainly?
Yeah, they just blah.
Yeah, it's sometimes it'd be so much easier with little, like the older the student gets, sometimes the more like therapy can kind of be involved as we go through it. But yeah, very like set it up as games, or like, I mean, with my kid when she was little, or we still do it. Like, let's play our bunny rabbit when she's hungry and hasn't had breakfast. Like, just a theme. Like, let's play a song about something, the snow melting, or, you can just give them a theme, or, a little intro to program music, or really specific things. Or what you need to check out is our friend Tony Parlapiano's Popmatic stuff. Are you in that group, Eric? Have you seen his stuff? He has all these like little creative games and really imaginative. Holy moly. Eric, if you can link to that, or Laura, connect with me. He demonstrates a lot of this in he's a Facebook group for teachers, and he has this one exercise called Campfire, where you're on Black Keys and you're going away for wood and coming back, and he has all this like really imaginative visualization stuff. I was just blown away, and I like got my kid. I was like, we're gonna do some, that stuff's awesome. So how mine is presented is often for more like adult learners, and I've used it in universities, but it's the same concept we can use with kids. At the moment, I don't have it formatted in a way. It's like, that's you get to be a creative partner in this, kind of figure out what set of limitations or what games will work for these people in this moment. But yeah, with kids, anything that's that uses drawing or animals, or like tell a story, something that will limit. Yeah, if you just say kind of do whatever, bang bang, boom boom. But yeah, you have to figure out what the right limitations are. And that just depends on, just as I said, improvising is about the sounds and the people that are in the room in this moment. And we have to do that as teachers too, that like what would work. What I'm having you all do wouldn't be the same as what if I've got some little kids. There'd be a lot more novelty in games and drawing pictures and animals and pets and all that. So yeah.
Will you share the limitations menu too? Is that already in the chat? Or?
Yeah. Oh, did I throw that? Oh, I put 10 improvisation games. That was the wrong.
Sure. Look good, but yeah.
That wasn't it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Those are, and then there's also a theme and variations menu and mode menus. Creativity trigger. Okay. I mean, you look at the improvisation games. Those are for groups, so.
I have a quick question, Steve.
There we go. Here, I just uploaded it successfully, possibly. Okay. Yeah, sure. Who is?
Margarita.
Okay.
So it's fun. It's interesting. This is really interesting because, I find when working with younger children, they're just natural improvisers, in a lot of cases, even with songwriting and stuff. If I ask them to come up with some songwriting ideas, or just write a bit or something, which is great. But, as they get older, like I'm working with a couple of middle school, high school students right now, and they've sort of grown out of that, what I mean? It's harder to get them to, approach their music with that same freeness, and a couple of them are studying jazz. So I just wondered for, something for a student, playing, trying to teach them improv in, say, like a jazz ensemble, if they're getting ready to play with their ensemble, and
yeah.
school or high school, playing over like 2-5-1 progressions or something. Do you
Yeah.
have, ideas for creative approaches for doing that? I mean, you can. I know there's a lot of there's a lot of ideas with like scales and everything, but they tend to just like want to memorize the scale, which is fine, not necessarily, but I kind of want them to be more free with their playing, not have to be so cerebral about, oh, I have to play this scale over this chord, etc.
Yeah, and that's an issue where the jazz pedagogy kind of started as like, oh, well, here's a chord symbol, here's what scale you play, and sometimes sometimes that like bypasses the harmonic function, and then it's all confusing, and you're just noodling on scales, and everyone knows that like that's not going to necessarily sound great. But that's actually how I got into this, doing more creative approaches for teaching jazz and playing over tunes. And it was sort of later on I got into more of this, what we're doing now. So I'll put a link to my page. So I have like an interactive like intro to blues course. It's very much on learning riffs by ear and playing variations and call and response. And then I have a book that goes largely through jazz harmony, but trying to keep creativity throughout the process. So something on a 2-5-1, once they understand how to put it together, like using certain voice leading lines as a shell, and then or target notes, and then improvising variations based on things like that. So there's a lot more than it would take me to answer here. So I think there's links to all that. I'll put my email in the chat too if you want follow up with any of this stuff, because I'm not probably getting to all of it. So there we go. But there should be a link to the book, and then my course. There's a free version of it that has like, I don't know, a lot of the course for free. But when you're asking more specifically about 2-5-1s and that sort of thing, at the moment I just have that in written form. I don't have any. I haven't gone into like video lessons on playing chord changes. Maybe I should. It's in the. It's your book work for any instrument. Yeah. So the one that I put in the chat, that ebook, has very little notation. That works for any instrument. And same thing. My jazz book does too. It requires that you're able to read notation. So, I mean, a lot of colleges use that as an improvisation text, but I use some of the same material with younger and beginner players. You just have to, figure out what to give them, when. But there's different transpositions for concert pitch and E flat, B flat, and bass clef instruments. I don't have transpositions for French horn, so you'd have to, or D flat piccolo. In that case, you'd have to transpose, but it's not designed specifically for saxophone. Oh, any other stops? I don't have a hard stop at 11 too. If people have other questions, I can hang. Okay, let's do this. I want to do a little group activity off the pentatonic scale menu. Let me pull this up. So what I'm going to do, we'll see how this goes. The people that have played before, so some of you can unmute. We can kind of do this if you have headphones on and echo cancellation going, you can unmute. We can do this together. It's a little bit messy, but it's pretty fun. Because we'll do this more rubato, so it doesn't have to link up. It can still be a interactive experience, even though we've got our friend Zoom latency. All right, so here's the pentatonic scale menu. So what we're going to do is just pick a... let's see, am I still sharing? Yep, okay. Let's see if I can pipe in a drone at the same time and not screw this whole thing up. So Eric was doing some major pentatonic. We're going to do this one here. Why can't I? Major pentatonic, flat 6, an altered pentatonic scale. So what we're going to do is all play together. So we have a pitch limitation now of these 5 notes. It really changes the vibe of it to lower the 6th scale degree. So what we'll do is our limitations, we have that as a pitch, and we can all play something. Let's say another limitation is playing something that's more singable or chorale-like. So we're going to make a big major flat 6 pentatonic. Somewhat as a chorale. Let's see. Do I have the... where'd the drone go? So I love doing these with drones. Some of this in this book is the most accessible part, is the modes with drones. That's one of the best ways to get kids going and grown-ups. So I like using these cello drones by Marcia Sloan. They're on YouTube and stuff, which is what I'm pulling up now. Thinking. Let's see. Can you hear the drone okay and the piano?
Which scale did you say to use? I'm sorry.
Oh, we're doing, it's called major flat 6, third measure on this thing. C, D, E, G, A flat. And yeah, let's have anyone who has headphones on can unmute, and let's just do this as a crazy group activity here. The last minutes. And then I can hang after for questions or what have you. Here we go. And ready to go. Cool. I'll pause it right there. Finding an ending is always fun. We keep going with that for a while. So some of these limitations work really well with groups, and I really love doing group workshops and retreats and that kind of stuff. Which I haven't. I was kind of expanding that, before the pandemic time. So been figuring out how to do that over Zoom, but not quite the same. But it can be really fun, especially like that. If we have some sort of pitch limitations, you can have a little more control over the harmony, because sometimes things that have no pitch limitation, when it gets more dissonant, that can make people feel uncomfortable. But Schoenberg liberated dissonance over 100 years ago, so something kind of crunchy might not be that crazy. But you can do something that's real peaceful and meditative if you want. Just set up the limitations in that way. But that's fun. I turned down and then off the drone because it was overpowering. I wasn't able to hear everyone. So yeah, that was a fun little event there. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm down to hang for a second. I don't know if you have a hard stop at 11. Well, I guess not, because it's 11:02. But
Yeah.
Actually,
Well,
Steve, would you mind teaching our lessons for us now? We all have students right now. Could we just have them plug into Zoom and have you just do it for us?
more fun the first time to teach someone else's student, right? For a moment, the new student energy you have, and then
Oh, totally going to use all this on all my lessons this afternoon. It's like you just did all my lesson planning for me for the day, and I'm going to just be like, I'm going to sell it. It's improvisation day.
Okay.
Pentatonic menus. I can sell that to a guitar
any
player.
kind of affiliate system to siphon off some of your money for the lessons.
Well worth it. Worth it.
Yeah, that stuff. I'm rearranging and putting the Creativity Triggers book. I'm actually opening the book with that exercise we did, listening to the ambient sounds and kind of changing the tone and the branding and all that. So there's some more group activities I have in there. So, but yeah, it's sort of a roadmap, and then you get to adjust. There's not like a right or wrong way to do it, but you'll need to make those adjustments. I haven't made it like a method because it's just so different by who's the approach that I use for a group of educators like you, or these are some things I do for university classes. It's different than if I've got a middle school, if I've got a 12-person middle school jazz combo, we're doing a lot different activities than, small group of adults. So kind of figuring out what works. And that takes experimentation too. I mean, that's how I figured this stuff out. Some of the same practices. Let's try this thing with a group and what works. And I've tried a whole bunch of things that have flopped, but I know certain things like playing just the note A or the, solfeggio exercise that we did seemed to work, but I only figured those out through trial and error. But yeah, any other questions? Do we have any in the...
I like that you just took a moment to say that you try ideas that flopped. I think that's an important thing as a teacher, is to like take these kind of ideas and use them and still be creative as a teacher and try stuff, because
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't work, right? And a really good idea will sometimes not work, but it's really worth doing those ideas anyway for the sake of experimenting.
Yeah, if you want to be, that's part of the deal for doing something creative. Um, and there's times where we're not. If I need a YouTube video on how to change the right fuse in my car, I don't want to be creative. I just need to figure out, how to get to point B as efficiently as possible. But whether you're writing or playing music or, weaving or who knows, yeah, it takes some experimentation, and that's how you really get the experience and the taste and all that. It's reminding me, so I've been doing, I don't know, once every other year or so, a recital where my students all write their own music. So I've got a lot of like beginner saxophone students, and this one, I had this kid named, his name is Cade, and I was like, your name's Cade, C-A-D-E. We got to do a cryptogram. So I wanted him to just like take the letters of his name. So on saxophone, he just played C-A-D-E, and that was his theme. And then he did variations. And then on the bridge, he was trying to figure out what to do for the next section. I said, well, just play it backwards, E-D-A-C. So this kid's like in eighth grade. And then we did a little backing track. My MIDI production skills have gotten better since then. But it ended up sounding like, I don't know, an 80s cop show.
Nice.
But this was one where we were just trying to come up with a format for what are we going to do that's original, and we took the letters in his name, and this kid we had fun with it. He wasn't a super advanced player, but this thing is an earworm. Yeah, and so that one's catchy. And then he rips a solo on it. But I helped harmonize that. I was like, what do you think of this chord? Okay, how about this one? He's like, that one. Okay, we'll choose it. So he wasn't quite at the, able to harmonize it on piano. But it was fun. So I've been doing that, and people have been using the drones, some text setting where they take a poem or a speech and put music to it. Lots of things like that. And yeah, it can make, for some pretty... it does help to mix things up, and I get stuck in the method book doldrums too sometimes, like, oh yeah, let me do this creative stuff I'm always teaching. Let's get these kids doing some of these.
What method book do you use, Steve?
Well, saxophone, I don't really like any of that. I've one from like 50 years old. I've been still using this Rubank book, but it's all outdated and some fingerings don't even exist. I haven't found a good replacement. The piano books are so much better than the wind books for the most part. And they have, I'm sure they have their sets of problems too, but I've used some other ones. I have like my own handouts and a mix of other stuff that I use. So that could be on the list, do a saxophone method book, but not feeling that yet. I want someone else to make a good one.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. This has been amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks to our volunteers for jumping in there. So it was fun. Yeah, I like doing these hands-on. I didn't want to just talk to you the entire time. So
yeah, thanks for being here, Steve. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks again, Eric, for plugging me in with your people. Where are the meetings if and when they are held in person again? Where do you guys meet?
Music Center of the Northwest. It's in Greenwood.
Oh.
Yeah.